Well, hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Annette Oltmans, and I'm founder and CEO of the MEND Project. Each month, I just want you to be aware that each month we take a deeper dive into various topics related to emotional abuse or double abuse. And these free monthly training workshops feature topics that either our followers request or topics that have a lot of interest, where we see a theme that comes our emails or that we feel is really important for you to know, because in our cohorts, they're very comprehensive, but it's hard to give an hour, let's say to one subject. So we give a lot of important information through these workshops, and we hope you'll go back and view the ones that are available on our YouTube channel, because there's a lot of really valuable information. If you have a topic that you feel is really important, send it to us, because we love your ideas. We love to hear your concerns. If something doesn't sit well with you, we love to hear about that too, so that we can offer a deeper explanation to help bring you more clarity. Or if there's just things that you're confused about, send us a message at info@themendproject.com, and we will work on either writing a blog or creating a workshop around that topic. Also, if you'd like to watch any of our previous workshops, or you'd like to rewatch this one, all of our workshops are recorded and housed on our YouTube channel and our training and resource page at themendproject.com. So you can either find it on our YouTube channel or you can go to our website. As I share today's topic, you may have thoughts or questions that come to mind. And I hope that you do, because it's really helpful if you share your thoughts and questions in the chat as soon as you think of them. Because we love to address all of your comments and questions from the chat, and it helps us organize the way that we present the questions if we don't just get a flood of questions at one time when we do our Q&A. So go ahead and submit them as you think of them. And if we don't get to it during our 1 hour, we are going to stay over to make sure that we do answer every question. If you'd like to send them anonymously, we're not going to call out anybody's name, but if you're really concerned for safety reasons or whatever, and you want to send them anonymously, you can do so by selecting Jill Rice from the drop-down menu, and Jill will make sure that I address them during our Q&A discussion time. All comments and questions will be shared in a manner that maintains anonymity. So you don't really need to do that, but if it makes you feel safer and more comfortable, please feel free to do so. If you're viewing this on YouTube as a recording, please be sure to subscribe and post your questions or thoughts in the comments on YouTube. Also, today's topic is a special one. Our team is prepared to stay on past the hour, like I said, to address comments and questions. And because we're sure that today it's a lengthy topic, and we're sure we're going to go over. So if you have to hop off, that's no problem, because the recording will be sent to you and you'll be able to hear the answer to your question if you submit it before you hop off. In case you do have to hop off, I want to make you aware that we're going to go deeper into this topic in our next 4-week curriculum cohort. So that's a class where we teach our curriculum. And this next one will be mostly focused on victims and survivors, or any who are experiencing or have experienced stress and confusion in your relationship. We always welcome advocates and therapists and so forth, but we also occasionally focus classes specifically for advocates and therapists. But this next one is going to be mostly focused on survivors and on victims. We're going to open the course mid-April, and our first live lesson together will be April 18th. So if you're interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. Please reach out to our team for more information. And Jill placed the link in the chat so you can see it there. Okay, so let's dive in. Today, I'm super excited to be talking about a fairly new topic for our audience, codependency versus the term self-love deficit disorder. And I understand that being beaten down to the point of losing a strong sense of yourself, where you are discounted, you're minimized, and you take on a lot of self-doubt, feeling responsible and over-functioning and working really hard in the relationship is super common. Or maybe you've recently uncovered that you have never had a strong sense of self. It's so common that victims of abuse are labeled as codependent, which feels like another criticism. And that is not what this message today is about. So I just want to make that really clear up front, but just hang in there with me as I unpack this a little bit. The term codependency might leave you feeling as though something is wrong with you. I'd really like to share some things with you about codependency. And my intention in bringing this to the forefront is not to shame you in any way, but rather inform you. In most cases, victims of emotional or physical abuse are empathic in nature, which is a really beautiful quality. Unlike your partners or whoever in your life is being abusive, who are not empathic, they're self-centered and either overtly or covertly controlling. So you may feel that your loving responsibility to help change your partner is really something that you can and should do. You may be working very hard at helping your relationship improve. I remember, oh my gosh, I was exhausted at how hard I was working to improve my relationship. While your partner, on the other hand, puts very little effort into making changes, or they might say, sure, I'll change this, but then it's broken promises, or they might change one thing and then they adopt a new abusive behavior that takes its place. This equation of you working extra hard while your partner doesn't is called overfunctioning. You are both working at taking good care of your partner, but no one is taking good care of yourself. You are doing the work of two people while your needs and desires are being neglected. Your empathic nature is bleeding over into the term codependency. You cannot change your partner. And I know that's might feel hopeless, and that's not what I'm getting at. Changing for an abuser is solely up to whether the abuser wants to engage in the lengthy process to change their own faulty beliefs and thinking, their sense of entitlement, their image management, things that we call the pillars of abuse that make up the mindset of an abuser. And we really unpack that in our cohort. So I hope you'll join to learn more about it. But codependency can also manifest in the ways that you then rely on others' points of views about decisions that only you can decide to make. You know what's best. I want you to trust yourself, or get to the place where in your mind today, if you're not trusting yourself, I want you to know that that is where we want you to get, where your instincts and your intuition, you have confidence in them, that you don't have a lot of self-doubt, regardless of how much you're being gaslighted by your partner or even others. And I remember I reached out to people in my Bible study group, and I they didn't believe anything that I had to say, and they criticized my points of view. They didn't understand. And I was so shook up by this. I was so traumatized because I didn't have a strong sense of self. And so I was giving them way more power in my life than what I should have been. And that is another type. It's part of codependency, where we not only overfunction, but we rely on others to speak into us. It's always good to get wise counsel, but when we give up our control and our decision-making process in our own lives to others, that is a symptom of codependency. Now, question, I'd like to ask you to be really honest with yourselves, and this will help us have discussion. These moments where we share our thoughts are kept confidential, so you won't be identified by name, but it's really helpful to hear what people are thinking, what each of you are thinking, what you might be believing and or feeling for several reasons. One is that it shows us that we are not alone. And I want to make a special point of that. This is a shame-free zone. No one is going to judge your feelings, your thoughts, or your beliefs. It's just going to help us have more engaging discussion. What are your feelings about the term codependency? Really think about that. Have you wondered if or identified that you might be codependent, or that you might have codependent tendencies? Does it make you feel as though something is wrong with you? Has someone told you that you might be codependent? Does it make you feel defensive that someone is trying to blame you for the harm in your relationship? Do you understand the good qualities of codependency, or do you feel confused by the topic altogether? So I'd love to just take a moment. I'll take a sip of water. If you can just kind of share some thoughts that you have about it, how it makes you feel, what you think about it, before I get into the meat of the discussion. So I'll just pause for a minute. Jill, are we going to read those responses?
Yeah, I will as they come in.
Okay.
Just to let you know, we were having some communications about the chat. We had a number of people sign in after we connected about that this morning with the CA. If your name is CA and you're having a hard time with figuring that out, I just dropped instructions in the chat. You can go ahead and look at that. Annette, can you repeat, a couple of people are asking, can you repeat the prompt and the question? Because I think people were focusing on this as well.
Sure. So I just want to know, what are your feelings about the term codependency? Has someone told you that you might be codependent? And if so, how does that make you feel? What are your thoughts and beliefs about codependency? Do you have opinions about it right now before we get into the meat of the term codependency versus self-love deficit disorder? I want to know how codependency makes you feel. Do you feel like, have you ever wondered or identified, gosh, I am codependent? Or have you ever thought that something is wrong with you, or that if someone has told you, like a therapist, that you might be codependent, does it make you feel defensive that someone is trying to blame you for the harm in your relationship? Do you understand the good qualities of codependency? Any thoughts that you have about the term codependency, whether it's feelings, opinions, beliefs, just feel free to share those with us.
Okay, here we go. We have a number of comments coming in, so we really appreciate that. The first one says, I was told that I was codependent when I tried to tell my ex-husband's aunt, who was a therapist, how he was acting, and she blamed me for being codependent, but never talked about his behavior.
Yeah, it's such a common problem that when, like, I'll just do a short example. A child comes to a teacher and says, I'm being bullied. It's so common for the teacher to instead of focusing on who the bully is and to confront it and to have consequences for the bully, they'll say something to the child like, well, go play on the other side of the playground, or what did you do to make them so angry? It's a way that it's this common theme where we blame the victim before we even address the true source of the problem, which is the abuse. Just because a victim being bullied on the playground might have said or done something to make somebody angry, or is a more shy personality, it doesn't matter what their characteristic is, it doesn't justify bullying. The bully and the bullying is what needs to be addressed. So I'm sorry that you went through that. It can be particularly impactful when somebody of knowledge and authority, and we give a lot of authority to therapists, whether we should or shouldn't, whether they're qualified or not. So I'm sure that affected you, and I'm really sorry that happened. It's not uncommon though.
Annette, we have a number. This is amazing. We have a number of responses. So I'm going to read through them. And if you want me to pause, please let me know. But I want to make sure I share all of them with you. For me, codependency has been a negative inference in that it always implies weakness. And the next one says, I feel like because you feel too much and try to help others, you are somehow broken and stupid. Codependency is me giving up who I am in order to fit into someone else or a group. Self-abandonment. I feel as though I overthink every decision because I might make the wrong choice related to current abuse and past. Codependency has always made me feel as though my power has been taken away, that I'm not an independent person and I cannot navigate my own way in life. It makes me feel very defensive about the things that have happened to me. I have always been told that codependency is enabling others' bad behaviors. Very negative thoughts about it makes the abuse I experience my fault. I've dealt with codependency all my life and had no idea until I was really broke. I believe there's a healthy line in it, but if we're not careful, we'll definitely fall back into it, and sometimes we will not even notice. I have found that there are a lot of definitions and associations, inferences depending upon who is using the term. I do not feel I was codependent going into the relationship, but was, quote, made to be codependent to avoid as much mistreatment as possible. Groups do plug us into this hole that I think is harmful. I have been in a 12-step program, especially, that never felt right, as it was focused on me being codependent and never considered how that came to be.
That is such a great observation.
Right?
All of these are fabulous comments, because they're so true, but it's so good that you noticed in yourself it didn't feel right. And it probably wasn't right. So I'm so glad that you're able to say that to yourself. And I really want you to own that.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there any other comments, Jill?
Yeah, there are. So I think I have like maybe 10 more.
Okay.
And so I'd love to share. I think it's great because they're all direct messages. So I want everyone here to feel that you are not alone. Like, there are so many people saying these things in the chat right now. So here's the next one. By labeling myself or someone else as codependent, it gives me an excuse for my behavior or explains my insecurities. Celebrate Recovery continues to insist that their traditional approach is appropriate for emotionally abused individuals when it totally does not. It has definitely been confusing, as I know that I confronted the abuser and tried to hold my own for a very long time, but at the same time, I was trying so hard to, quote, fix the situation or the abuser and my lack of understanding of the control and bullying. I have studied codependency and found it very confusing. Someone is asking to speak up. If that's me, I hope I am being well heard. If that's Annette, maybe I hear you just fine, but I think someone's having a hard time hearing with our sound.
Oh, shoot. Let me see if I can. Does this help at all?
Yeah, you have, and maybe try turning up the audio on the computer on your side, and then as well for the person who asked that. And then mine is now all the way up.
Mine is all the way up too.
Okay, very good. Okay, so a handful more. Being called codependent insinuates this is something that would fix your issues if you could get rid of your codependency.
Good point.
I'm in a 12-step program for friends and families of alcoholics, so I hear that I am as sick as the addict, and we always ask, what was my part? It's so frustrating because I'm not responsible for the abuse. The
Mhm.
codependent narrative feels like victim blaming, and I often speak up with the disclaimer that abusive relationships don't fit. The group is helpful for healthy ways of living, but not all of it fits for recovery from abuse. Um, Okay, it was me. They couldn't hear me. I'm so sorry. And so that's clarified, and that they can hear you. And
Okay.
then I have a handful more. So someone says they are confused. They never see it as a positive. They're very confused about the term. One says, I don't know much about it, but I didn't think people who are codependent are functional. Not sure how to change. Oh, never mind. That's regarding the name. I'm sorry about that. Someone feels blamed, and on and on. So we have and then this last one just came in. It's helpful to understand the description of codependency, so I have an opportunity to self reflect. I have found it helpful to me, and although it can feel like a blaming label and can be used the way by ignorant people, a strong sense of my value has allowed me to look honestly at myself. I was marinated in and trained to serve and worship some and reject and deride others. And so, anyway, I just wanted to share all of that with
I
you. And
love that you have a strong sense of yourself now, that
yeah,
you don't need to take on more of that term than what might apply. It's always good to learn about things, to self-reflect. I mean, if we're unwilling, usually an abusive partner, that's one of the big problems, is they're unwilling to self-reflect. They want you to perform in a certain way that meets their need according to their worldview of how they view relationships. And each one is different. No two situations are alike. So I just love it that you're able to understand that it's up to you to notice your gut and to not take on more than is your responsibility. Okay, am I cutting anybody off, Jill?
nope, you are good to go.
Okay. There's a wonderful book that I would like to recommend, and it's by Ross Rosenberg, and it's titled The Human Magnet Syndrome, The Codependent Narcissist Trap. That's its subtitle. So if you've not ever heard of it, I encourage you to look into it. I really encourage you to buy it because Ross is a psychotherapist and an expert witness on narcissistic abuse. He is globally renowned for his work in trauma, codependency, gaslighting, pathological narcissism, and narcissistic abuse. In his book, Ross presents new concepts. So with regard to codependency, rather than using that term, which I love, he prefers the phrase self-love deficit disorder. So it's really that we oftentimes out of necessity, and in some of your comments, you said that you may have been slightly codependent, but you became much more codependent just to try to keep peace in the house and to thwart abusive actions. So that's what I want you to think about. With regard to codependency, self-love deficit disorder more accurately and more respectfully describes what's really going on inside. So Rosenberg provides a pyramid to graphically illustrate the multidimensional aspects of the problem, beginning with attachment trauma. So now looking back, in your childhood, somebody who will tend to be codependent or lack self-love, who has maybe self-doubt, it begins with attachment trauma. It moves to this core sense of shame, that the self-doubt feels like you have shame about yourself, the self-doubt fills you with shame. There's pathological loneliness. Really think about that. Even in your relationships, you aren't attaching to them in healthy ways. And so you have this internal sense of self-doubt, which makes you feel lonely, as though people don't understand you, or you're too afraid to share your full self because they won't understand you. And so you have this pathological loneliness. And then finally, codependency addiction, where codependency is the symptom. The pyramid shows that codependency is not the primary problem requiring treatment. So I want to just go back to one thing I said, and I know this is only going to make me go longer on an already long talk, but attachment trauma, I just want to use an example. My attachment trauma with my parents was that I was not allowed to express my emotions. If I said, what you just said hurt my feelings, they would judge me and punish me for speaking. That was determined to be disrespectful. I was allowed to speak factual, this event happened and then this event happened. But if I talked about how my parents made me feel, then I was punished or looked down upon or judged. And so that raised me up to doubt my perspective on things. It made me wonder, maybe I don't have a good viewpoint of what is accurate in the situation. So I didn't trust my gut. I didn't develop that gut intuition because it was always shut down. So this is just one example of attachment trauma, but it can be a parent who isn't emotionally connected to you. It could be a narcissistic parent. And when I say a parent not emotionally connected, it could be they're really serving your emotions. We need to be serving our children's emotions. When they say, so-and-so hurt my feelings at school, instead of saying, oh, well, that's just what happens in your age group. Kids are mean. No, you say, well, tell me what was said. Let me hear about it. How did that make you feel? And really help them unpack their feelings and validate their feelings, because that will actually increase emotional IQ. And so attachment trauma can create this sense of self-doubt that actually hinders our emotional IQ, even if we're highly intelligent people. And I'll show you more how that manifests in the relationship. So I'd like to talk you through the pyramid that Ross Rosenberg uses in his book. At the base of the self-love deficit disorder is attachment trauma. So this trauma happens in childhood, oftentimes when there's a narcissistic parent who gives conditional love or judgmental love, or gives you love, based on your performance, your accomplishments. Trauma is repressed when you're a child, and the child grows up feeling worthless, unlovable, or unseen. Now, it might not be overtly, I'm worthless, or overtly, I'm unlovable, but there is this internal self-doubt that says, maybe I don't really have the worth that I hope to have, or maybe something is wrong with me intrinsically and I'm not lovable, or maybe I'm unseen because they don't really connect with me emotionally, so they don't really know who I am. Then the next step is that there's core shame, where there is a distorted definition of self. So the way that you view yourself has this distortion of shame that isn't really warranted. We shouldn't feel shame about ourselves. I mean, if you do something guilty, I'm talking guilt versus shame, where if you break the law and you feel guilty, you need to go and repair if you break somebody's fence, you need to go repair it, that sort of thing. That's a natural sense of guilt. But shame is basically saying, I'm bad, something's wrong with me. And so that is a distortion that comes from self-love, that is part of self-love deficit disorder. And often what accompanies this sense of shame is comments, internal comments to yourself, like, I'm only as good as what I do for others, or I'm only lovable when I'm invisible, meaning that you put your needs secondary to the other person's needs, because then you will experience their love. But if you say, no, I need this, or if you criticize, or if you say, this doesn't sit well with me, and I want this kind of behavior to stop, then you feel unlovable because of how the abuser or the narcissistic parent or the disconnected parent was treating you. And so that's just part of this distorted definition of self in this sense of core shame. The next block on the pyramid is pathological loneliness, the pain of being alone. In self-love deficit, the person experiences sometimes excruciatingly painful feelings of worthlessness and unlovability. Remember, I mentioned that there was early attachment trauma. Attachment, the emotional bond formed between a child and the primary caregiver, profoundly influences both the structure and the function of the developing child's brain. So a disorganized attachment, or something other than a healthy organized attachment, a disorganized attachment, whether caused by abuse, neglect, or emotional unavailability on the part of the caretaker, can negatively impact brain structure and functioning, causing developmental or relational trauma. In other words, sometimes it will overly develop your amygdala, which is the gas pedal in the car, just to give a metaphor. So you're overly, it's because it's been traumatized, it's overly developed and on high alert, where the hippocampus, which calms, is underdeveloped. And so this actually can manifest into physiological responses in your brain that you need to become aware of, because, for example, if you had a parent that was always really supporting you emotionally and saying, let me hear what you're feeling. Why does it make you feel that way? It's okay for them to say, well, have you thought of it this, you might want to think of it this way too. It doesn't, you can share other things, but you want to really engage in the child's emotional expressions. And when those soothing conversations are not taught and replicated over time, it can underdevelop the hippocampus, which acts as the brake in the car, which gives you tools to navigate through conflict in a more, by viewing the situation more accurately. Instead of this shame, it helps you view it more accurately. Next on the pyramid is self-love deficit disorder addiction, where self-medication is that loneliness is alleviated by attraction to, let me try to say this. So self-medication, I'm not talking about medicine or drugs. I'm talking about, which that can also happen, but in this conversation, I'm talking about there's almost an addiction, this self-medicated feeling that comes over, where the loneliness that you're feeling inside is alleviated by attraction to a narcissist or the compulsion to stay with them, because that's what you're familiar with. That replicates more what your upbringing was like. So somebody who's super attentive to you emotionally might feel invasive. And so it's important to really look at your early attachment trauma and unpack how this addiction ends up happening where you are attracted to people similar to the kind of primary caregivers that you experienced. Narcissists are also emotionally unavailable, similar to the codependent's primary caretaker. The codependent is subconsciously attracted to what they are familiar with, just like I said, through the pain, the neglect, the emotional neglect, the confusion. How confusing is it to be with a narcissist or a covert abuser? It's so hard to unpack sometimes that it can take years to figure out that you're dealing with somebody who actually is treating the relationship from an entirely different worldview than what you are. They are not empathic, and they're never going to really be empathic in a consistent way. And so there's confusion and there's self-blame. Self-blame, similar to early childhood, continues into adulthood. And finally, at the tip top of the pyramid is what the term self-love deficit disorder, that all of these other components make up, which describes the codependent person as the selfless, not selfish, the selfless, compulsive, now caretaker who habitually attempts to control or nurture others into loving them. Now, I want to just unpack that for a minute. It's not like you are a controlling person, but you might feel that your love and your nurturing and your crossing over boundaries, stepping into the lives of others, which let's just take an abuser. When we overfunction, we are now stepping over onto their side of the fence rather than working on us holding really firm boundaries and developing our belief in ourselves, developing our voice. We start over functioning, trying to help them get the help that they need, which in any marriage, we want to help each other. But when it's habitual, when that's the answer is to step over, that is this compulsive now caretaker mentality that is the definition, or that peaks the definition of self-love deficit disorder. Excuse me 1 second. Self-love deficit disorder typically begins in childhood, and again is not indicative that something is wrong with you. However, a lack of love for yourself can lead you to doubt your gut instincts or cause you to gaslight yourself. It's one thing to be gaslighted by others, but we gaslight ourselves too. We think, did I really hear that right? Or it must be me. I remember, I'll just use myself as an example. I intrinsically thought something must be wrong with me. Why am I not experiencing empathy? Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I never learned how to do relationships. Maybe I'm trying so hard to communicate my needs, my wants, my criticisms, no matter how gently or firmly I tried, it caused me to doubt my own gut instincts. And I gaslighted myself. And this is very common. We have this cognitive dissonance where we aren't accurately looking at the situation, and we take on more responsibility than what is ours. And that is part of self-love deficit disorder. So codependency or self-love deficit disorder leads you to where there is this cognitive dissonance I mentioned between what's actually occurring versus how you redefine events in your mind to justify your over-functioning role. So let me just say that again. The cognitive dissonance, which is the disconnect between what's actually happening, causes you to redefine events to justify your over-functioning role. Cognitive dissonance means that your thinking is not accurate to your circumstances and can cause you to make decisions that are not good for you. Self-love deficit disorder also explains your willingness to be treated abusively or in a marginalized manner by your partner or others. Now, I'm not saying this is your fault that you're in an abusive situation. Most people are blindsided by the abuse. Like, it was all great during the dating relationship, and then once the marriage certificate was signed, something changed, or there were red flags that you just didn't see because of this cognitive dissonance, that then the abuse escalates over time. But basically, you're accepting being treated in a marginalized manner by your partner or maybe by others. And we cannot change others, and others cannot and should not make decisions for us. That includes your spouse, the abusive person, and sorry, you guys, I really need water. So you can't change others, and others cannot and should not make decisions for us. That includes both the abusive person and, like in my story and in so many stories, or I wouldn't mention my story, is that you trust the responder with your story and you trust their feedback, even if they're not qualified to give you feedback. Every victim needs to progress to a state of self-awareness and self-reflection based on what is accurately happening and where they believe in their self-worth, while at the same time understanding and accepting their own limitations to change others, to change others' thinkings, to change others' beliefs. We can only do so much. We're all adults and we're entitled to our own beliefs, wrong or right. I mean, if you just look at politics, for example, we have people that lean on the far left and people who lean on the far right. Each person is entitled to their beliefs, and they're not likely to change over, I'm so sorry, to another point of view without significant work. We're all entitled to our own beliefs. It's not up to us to change somebody to an entirely different worldview, but we tend to not see that our abusive partner or that our emotionally disconnected or abusive parents had a belief system that was completely different than what felt really good and right inside. And so it confuses us. And so you can only change your own faulty thinkings and beliefs about yourself and others. Now, I mentioned briefly that what we talk about in our cohort quite a bit is the faulty belief system of the abuser. But victims also have a faulty belief system, believing that things are our fault, believing that we aren't worth more than we're worth, believing that maybe we're unlovable or that we don't quite know how to communicate effectively. These faulty beliefs are things that only you can change. And it's hard to even know that you need to change them when you're functioning in this self-love deficit disorder, where you're grounded in self-love deficit disorder or codependency. It's hard to understand that, but it's really worth the time and effort to begin to build this self-love that you need. It requires a lot of effort, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I really want to encourage you to find the help that you need to address and resolve your low feelings of self-worth. Loving yourself and believing that you deserve better is essential to changing your circumstances, whether you decide to stay well in your relationship or leave well in your relationship. I so apologize. There is hope to overcome self-love deficit disorder. The goal is self-love abundance. Now, some people might not like that term because we think, well, if I love myself so much, am I egotistical? Am I the narcissist now? No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about truly respecting yourself, respecting your self-worth. We're not talking about abusing other people. We're talking about really loving yourself well, because how can you function in a healthy relationship if you don't come from a core place where you love yourself well and can set healthy boundaries, can communicate your feelings and thoughts, can have meaningful discussion and adopt collaborative plans to change or improve your relationship. This comes from a strong sense of self-love abundance. And in that, you experience peace, self-respect, freedom in accepting that you're an imperfect person. We're all imperfect, but we can correct our mistakes and apologize and say, you know, I don't like the way I responded. After self-reflection, I want to correct it. And yet you're not, oftentimes you can't do that well in an abusive situation, because then the abuser uses that against you in future discussions. So you're so, it's so distorted how you need to function in an abusive situation. But when you're truly in a place where you're allowed to have self-love abundance, you can feel your own lovability and that you're worthy of receiving love. Dr. Rosenberg uses the pyramid illustration for self-love abundance as well. And in the self-love pyramid, the root of the problem is addressed in a safe therapeutic setting where hidden childhood trauma is brought forward, accepted, and then let go of. And this process allows healing that brings about core self-love. And the best way to work on this is with a qualified therapist. And we have a blog post that you can search how to choose a therapist. And so I recommend that you look at this. So at the base of the pyramid is healthy attachment of self-love abundance, where one begins to show self-love as an unconditional and accepting parent. This is the foundation for self-love, self-care, and self-respect. The next block on the pyramid is core self-love, where one starts having a realistic and empowered definition of self, you know, where you feel validated, you trust your instincts, you are willing to self-reflect, but you're also willing to hold boundaries. You're willing, an example that comes to my mind is, how often do we teach our girls to be empathic and polite and helpers, and we don't teach them enough about self-empowerment. So when they begin dating, many girls feel uncomfortable saying no to sexual advancements because they haven't been taught that no is a perfectly appropriate word that should be a strong part of their vocabulary, a strong part of their belief. And so that would be an example of how they don't feel fully lovable and fully empowered. Then there is existential peace, where the person feels content while being fully present. So you can be your full and honest self, and you feel content with it, regardless of what other people are saying or thinking. You are not going to be influenced by people who are not like-minded to you, or who are judging you wrongly, or putting you into a box, into a wrong category. Instead, you feel the freedom to live as an imperfect but worthy and lovable person who's seeking to grow and be better each and every day. And you know your core self is good and that you are trying to be your best self. But you allow yourself a little room to be imperfect, because none of us is perfect, but it's not a distorted view like, oh, something's wrong with me, I'm intrinsically unlovable, and those sorts of things. The next block is mutuality and reciprocity in relationships, creating security, creating a really safe attachment with your loved one. Mutuality and reciprocity goes both ways. So often in abusive relationships, it's the person with self-love deficit disorder that's doing most of they're doing the accommodation, they're accommodating their abuser's needs and wants, and they're foregoing their own. So it's not mutual, it's not reciprocated, it's one-sided. I mean, I'm not saying it's universally one-sided. That's what makes abuse so confusing, is sometimes the abuser will do some things, but I'm talking consistently in everyday conversations, there should be mutuality and reciprocity, not just a one-off or something on occasion. It should be the common theme of a healthy relationship. And finally, at the peak of the pyramid is actualized self-love, where the person has serenity and acceptance about their place in the world. They know who they are, and they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, and they love themselves, and they know that they are lovable and deserve to experience love. And that doesn't mean they think they're perfect. It means they love themselves despite their imperfectness, because they know that they're always trying to be better. They're growing, they're open-minded, they're self-reflective. They allow other people to make their mistakes. They don't jump in and try to fix those mistakes. They have a strong sense of their part of the equation. Their love is strongly and firmly rooted. Okay, so for the first time in self-love abundance, they are comfortable in their own skin, free from shame, free from that deep sense of loneliness. I mean, how many of you who have been in an abusive situation, even though you're in a marriage, you feel incredibly lonely, you feel minimized and unheard, devalued, and so forth. But in self-love abundance, you're free from that loneliness, because it no longer is part of how you view yourself. You have this feeling of, I am worthy of relationships. I am worthy of positive relationships that are mutually healthy, and where reciprocity and collaboration and mutuality are all part of it, whether it's your friend group or your spouse. They are now free to find and demand mutuality and reciprocity in all of their relationships. This achievement is fully possible. And as you begin to love yourself well, you'll be able to experience fulfilling relationships. And it's so, it's such a contrast to how it used to be when you can get to self-love abundance. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I'm just wondering, maybe if you, what I'd love for you to comment on right now is, what self-deprecating or self-loathing thoughts have you recognized that have entered your thought processes more often than you wish they would? So, I mean, we all can have self-deprecating thoughts, on occasion, but can you identify and submit it in the chat, things that you notice is the repeat cycle of self-criticism, of self-loathing, of unlovability? Or do you have firm beliefs that you are flawed in some way? We'd really benefit from you sharing some of those highly personal experiences and thoughts, which you will understand quickly as we move forward, why we're going to touch on those. But if you're willing to be open, and remember, you're anonymous, it would be really helpful to share some of those thoughts with us right now. I'll give you just a few minutes.
Yeah, okay, they're starting to come in, Annette. So I'm just going to go through them. We really appreciate, I don't know if everybody's seeing the chat, so I just want to say this by voice. We really appreciate all your engagement because it not only enriches this time and this topic for our team, but it helps everyone here who's listening to know like this is not a singular experience for one person that one person experiences. There are so many people relating, and this is a very healthy chat. It is so full, and I'm very excited about that. I know Annette gets very thankful about that too. So we appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and start through Annette as they're coming in. Um, okay, so starts with I can't make good decisions for my own life. I often feel like a non person. I take up too much time of someone else. I'm not worthy of someone giving their time to me or giving me things or like I don't deserve, or I won't be loved until I'm perfect. It's hard to get up in the morning, um, having purpose. I can't seem to eat healthy and exercise regularly to lose weight. There's something wrong with me and I can't seem to get it together, even though I have given the same to others. I'm not enough. I won't be loved until I'm out of debt. I won't be loved unless I look perfect. Um, it says, like, what I contribute doesn't matter or isn't valuable, that I will never have what it takes to attract a healthy spouse. Someone saying, thank you for this webinar. It really is hitting home. Um, I'm not able to set boundaries to end a conversation when I'm no longer comfortable. I don't trust my own decisions or decision making. I always thought I was inferior because of my acne and scars. I was a horrible mom. I was a working spouse. My ex always contradicted my parenting. He triangulated my daughter, and I have him on video telling her as a 1 year old that was at school, yep, she deserted you again. My daughter disowned me when I filed divorce and refuses to let me see my only grandchildren and believes the lie of his smear campaign. Though I have other children, family, self worth, this deficiency keeps coming up. So sorry about that.
Yeah, it's so sad. And it's also so common because a covert abuser is so manipulative at using children, at programming them, at gaslighting them into believing a completely distorted view. I've seen, I just want to comment on, first off, I'm thankful for all those comments. They so hit home. And this is exactly what we're talking about. But I just want to make a sidebar that if you ever have the chance to be able to speak to your daughter, rather than talk about the things that the father is saying that are inaccurate, if you just invest your time in how is her life going, you want to hear about her life, you want to hear about her friendships, her activities, her child. If you keep the focus solely on that you're there to serve her, that you're so interested in her, whether you do that in cards at first or whatever, I've seen a lot of cases turn around for the better. But when a parent feels so compelled to over compensate for the negative statements that the abusive spouse is making, it just creates too much chaos in the adult child's mind, and they're not able to discern that. But when you model that you are a parent who's not slandering the other parent, you're truly there because you're interested in their life. I've seen a lot of those situations turn around, and I hope that for you.
Annette, I want to say something really quick just to honor there's two things I want to honor. One is 11 o'clock. So I just want to get that to you and let you know it's 11. We are here to stay. So if you're here with us, we are here to stay with you on this topic. If you have to hop off, we do have the recording that will be sent to your inbox. And so I wanted to just let you know there's probably a handful at least more of comments, and I want to honor that they shared. Can I share them with you before we press on?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to keep reading through a few of these. People will see that I'm not perfect and leave me. It's a matter of time. I'm afraid to be alone. I'm afraid to slow down and have no kind of have to feel the pain and fear of my abusive, soon to be ex husband. Um, Rooted in childhood trauma from my mother and carried on through abusive marriages, being told I am fat, useless, and stupid. I think about myself, how stupid I was to get hooked by the abuser and cope through drinking for 10 years, enduring abuse and not recognizing it until I was 4 months sober 1 year ago.
Good
Uh,
for you.
yeah, so good. Um, we have, okay, so we have a number of more, and we actually have questions. And so I'm gonna just leave you with these questions real quick because I think you're transitioning into this at this point. We have a lot of questions of how can I ever heal from this, for my relationship with my kids, for myself. We have a number of questions like that. It can feel very overwhelming. And so I'm gonna pause there because the other questions are kind of leading.
Okay. This talk is going to go another probably 20 minutes before I'm done. But what I want to say is what I'm not getting into today is the steps that you need to take to get to self-love abundance. However, our next workshop that we're doing, I don't have the date right offhand. I don't know if you do, Jill, but our next workshop is going to be about trauma bonding, which has a lot to do with what creates self-love deficit disorder. And then very quickly after, we're not going to wait a full month. We're going to try to do it the next week or 2 weeks at the latest. The steps that you need to be taking to get to self-love abundance, that you need to be working with a therapist or really working hard on your own. And we'll give you some resources for that. But that's where I will talk about the formula that you need to be focusing on to get to self-love abundance. Okay, so let me just move on. There's so many ways that you can love yourself well. If you're feeling stuck, I just want to offer you a couple. I'm just going to go through this part quickly. You may start by talking to yourself and talking about yourself with kindness. Sometimes we aren't aware of self-deprecating or thinking poorly of ourselves, or we apologize a lot. We apologize for things that we don't even need to apologize for. You know, we're just interacting with friends and we're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. We say, stop doing that. Start thinking about things that you can say to yourself, even if you stand in front of a mirror. I am lovable. I am worthy. These are just little micro steps. This is not the kind of full work that you need to do, which I really can't wait to get into, give you in our, not our next workshop, but the one right after that. But try to instead be aware of your thoughts if they aren't kind to yourself. And when you notice it, you can say to yourself, that's interesting, or something non-judgmental. You don't need to say, I'm so dumb, or I'm never going to learn. No, we don't want to say those absolute statements. We can just say, that's interesting. Something non-judgmental. Then replace it with something true about yourself. Sometimes even writing out a list of your attributes. And it doesn't have to be extensive, but it can be. And all the good and true things about yourself is a good start to just start working on changing, just slowly changing the way you talk to yourself. You can understand that no two abusive situations are alike. So if there's physical or sexual abuse, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your local domestic violence agency or domestic violence hotline for more sophisticated ways to protect yourself from being exposed regarding the upcoming suggestions that I'm going to make to you, that I want you to consider. So destructive behaviors and danger have the characteristic to increase in intensity over time. So it's important, really important, that you not minimize your current circumstances if you're in an abusive situation. because they can get worse. And so we're all about safety. But so often the male partner controls the money in the house. So I'm moving on to this point, even to the point where some women don't have their names on accounts, in which case it's essential to start, even if in very small amounts, to put some money aside secretly in an account that is only under your name, or even have a cash stash in a place that cannot be found. Maybe you house that money with a friend. And you begin doing confidential, I want to emphasize that word, confidential research, gathering documents, gathering information that will provide proof of maybe investments that your spouse is involved in, or savings accounts that your name is not on. I don't recommend that you share your investigative work with your partner, but I would like you to consider insisting that your name be included on all community property accounts, so that you won't be in this bind if, God forbid, something happens to your spouse and there's really no reason, there is no reason under the sun that you should be shut out of family resources and investments other than your partner's need to manipulate and to control you. And I would also look into credit cards that maybe your spouse has opened in your name, racking up debt in your name that you have no knowing of. So you might want to do a credit report and do a little research. Okay. Number 2, begin communicating with safe people regarding your current or past experiences. The emphasis is on the word safe. How that might look is possibly by writing them, not on the computer where there's a record of it, but writing them a handwritten letter that cannot be, identified as coming from you. And this needs to be a trusted person, and start to share some of what you're dealing with, and just tell them you're telling them this because you just want them to be aware that if you become in a really unsafe situation, you don't want them to be blindsided by what you're sharing. You want them to have some background and to please keep it absolutely confidential, that your safety depends on it. We cannot heal in isolation. We need connection. We need love. We need support. We need validation. We need empathy. And so it's important to have people that we can share with. And those people may not be your family and your friends or your friends at church. You may need to join a support group or find new friends, like going to an exercise class regularly so that you start some new friendships. Because oftentimes people who have seen your spouse in a positive light will have too hard a time to recognize the truth that's going on behind closed doors. So be open-minded to having new friends to help bring you those endorphins and those positive feelings that you need in connection, because you cannot heal in isolation, like I mentioned. Okay, number 3, journal. Look, it's a very healing process, and it's important to document everything that happens. This not only serves as proof that you may need someday to use in court, but it helps you fight against being gaslit by your spouse or by yourself because of your own level of cognitive dissonance, of not accurately viewing the situation. So when we journal and then our spouse says, I never said that, or you said this or that, you can go back and look at that journal and you can feel immediate validation. And I'm not saying that you use that journal to tell your spouse. Only you can know what is safe and what is not safe to do. But for yourself, to validate yourself and to have that in writing is incredibly powerful. And to create a historical documentation is incredibly powerful in a court situation later. Number 4, attend to physical problems. Attend to your health. So often we take care of everyone else, but we don't attend to ourselves. Sometimes we're so depressed and distraught that we don't even attend to our hygiene the way that we need to. Go exercise, go for a daily walk, get your nails done if that's your thing. Start taking care of yourself. Your body will or has been compromised. And that's just what happens when you're in constant stress. These stress hormones like cortisol really compromise your endocrine system, and it affects how you view yourself, like depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, trauma. You end up with post-traumatic stress. So it's really important to not just think about how next week I'm going to do something for myself, but to just do it. And sometimes it helps to have an accountability partner, a friend that you can call to say, will you take a walk with me once a week? So that you at least have that once a week walk, and you have somebody holding you accountable, or someone holding you accountable to say, I want to try something new every week. I want to try an art class, or I want to try pickleball, or I want to try an exercise class. And I need an accountability partner to say, have you done that this week? You know, when are you going to do it? When is it scheduled? Someone to help you start doing it, because you're not going to get the benefits until you actually do it. And you're not going to feel like doing it. But this is something that you have to really stretch yourself and do so that you can experience the benefits of it. Number 5 is educate yourself, whether that's by reading books, reading online, strumming through our website or other websites. Glean as much information as you can. Part of self-love abundance comes from really understanding the dynamics of your abuse situation. That's just one of the stages that I'm giving you a little preview of, to really understand the dynamics of your abuse so that you can start to eliminate the confusion, because confusion creates a lot of stress, and confusion creates more confusion, and stress creates more confusion. And so to really start educating yourself and finding your story in other stories, finding similarities, lets you know you're not alone, and really validates you, and will start to sharpen your skill set that you will need to set boundaries, whether you decide to stay or whether you decide to leave. Okay, each of these examples that I've shared might cause you to feel oftentimes people with self-love deficit disorder or codependency feel like when they're doing some of these things that they are actually the ones being manipulative and secretive. But there is such a thing as positive manipulation. We use that with our kids all the time. They don't want to try a new sport, and we tell them, well, if you do, I'll let you have this toy at the end or whatever, because we know that sometimes they need to be stretched. And so we're going to encourage them to do things that they may be too afraid to try. And kids always want to be the best at everything. And so it's uncomfortable to not be good at something, but they need us to push them into trying new things. That's positive manipulation, meaning that you may be manipulative in terms of secrecy, but it's not to harm anyone. It's to help yourself. It's to help your children to be equipped to make decisions that will produce the best possible outcomes, whether you decide to stay or whether you decide to leave. And it's very important to understand that your abusive partner is operating from a controlling and negative manipulative mindset that does not match your motives for wanting to be properly informed, having reciprocity, mutuality, to view your situation accurately, and to be well prepared to care for you and your children. So it's very important to start learning and doing those things. And for some of you, keeping secrets feels opposite to how you have been expressing yourself in life or behaving regularly. You may be one who over-confides or overshares with others, which is also a sign of self-love deficit disorder or codependency. We don't hold good boundaries. We have a hard time holding boundaries or setting boundaries with others, but we also have a hard time holding boundaries that we're responsible to hold for ourselves. And oversharing or overtaxing another person would be a boundary violation. And so you want to not overfunction. You want to not carry the lion's share of the weight in your relationships, because this lack of boundaries is rooted in codependency. So you may feel it's your responsibility to be transparent and vulnerable in order to receive approval and acceptance from others, and to encourage others to do the same. And this may be difficult to take in, but trying so hard and lacking boundaries may be a way to attempt to actually control your relationships by increasing your inner circle without first determining whether or not you are sharing with someone who is safe and who is willing to listen. So it's really important that we take baby steps with people who we hope to be safe, and not feel that it's your responsibility to overshare. It absolutely is not. You don't have to share anything. I just want you to share. I'm trying to encourage you to share a little bit about your situation to the degree that the other person is safe and can handle it with confidentiality, by validating you, supporting you, not criticizing you. If you feel criticized or judged, or they're giving you instructions, that's not a safe person. Move on to someone else. And that's why I love support groups. If you can find one at a local domestic violence agency or at your local church, they often have, I'm not talking about codependency groups, I'm talking about abuse support groups. Whether speaking about your intimate relationship or relationships with family members and friends, there is a term defined by Brand Chaft called pathological accommodation. And this is also a part of self-love deficit disorder, pathological accommodation, where we go out of our way to accommodate others. We don't use the word no enough. And we can say it gently, gosh, I would so love to help you, but I'm just too taxed and I don't have the time. But when time frees up, I'll let you know, and I'm happy, whatever. But this pathological accommodation basically describes ways that we codependent types, of which I'm one of those, operates unconsciously with the objective to secure an attachment with another person, even if that attachment has been threatened by unhealthy behaviors, even if it's not somebody we should want to securely attach with. So I really want you to hold on to that word, pathological accommodation. Are you working super hard at accommodating the other person? That's something you need to self-examine. Try prioritizing yourself. Many victims and survivors of abuse place their abuser and others' needs and wants ahead of their own. You can start today to put yourself first. It's healthy. It's what you should do. Have you ever heard that phrase where, you're on an airplane and they say, put your oxygen mask on before you put it on your children? It seems counterintuitive, but it's absolutely essential. You need to be doing these things to take care of yourself before you are going to be well enough to care for your children, or to accurately view your situation, and to be able to work on the steps for self-love abundance, which is, like I said, we're going to talk in 2 workshops from now. Be kind to yourself. This is huge. It's a really important part of healing codependent or self-love deficit thinking. Trust yourself. This one is huge. You may have such a lack of self-trust. I want you to start really, if you have a hard time making decisions, you might need to start. I remember doing this. I started reading the newspaper every day because I realized I don't even know what's going on in the world. I don't have an opinion about what's going on. So I read a liberal newspaper and I watched conservative news. I wanted to hear both sides so I could form my own opinions and feel confident in my decisions. It needed to start with something outside of myself, politics, just so I had an opinion. That's how completely stripped of self-confidence that I was. And for you, it may be in a different place. It may be reading Ross Rosenberg's book. It may be some other way to help you build a sense that you can trust your instincts, that you can make decisions. And if you make a decision and you realize it was the wrong one, no big deal. We all make wrong decisions. You just change your mind later and say, okay, that one didn't work out, so now I'm going to try this. And don't be so hard on yourself. Famous people make bad decisions all the time, and they learn from their mistakes and they change. So don't be afraid of that. And I want you to forgive yourself. You're not perfect. Nobody is. You make mistakes. We all do. And I want you to have a forgiving mindset. You're not ignoring what you might have received information and you chose to make a different decision, but you're not intentionally ignoring good advice. You're responding the way you did for reasons that you had at the time. So forgive yourself and let yourself off the hook a little. Nobody is perfect, not a single person. So embrace your humanity, be kind to yourself. And while you're being self-forgiving, practice setting healthy boundaries. You can also be forgiving of others and keep your boundaries in place. Forgiving doesn't mean that they get access to you in the same way again. Forgiving is for your heart. And boundaries are an important way for you to love yourself and care well for yourself and your own heart and your own needs while placing firm limits on those around you with consequences if they do not comply. A boundary without a consequence is nothing more than a complaint. So, for example, if you don't set boundaries in your life, you might try a boundary for just 20 minutes. Your spouse does something that's really harmful. You say, you know what? This relationship is broken. I need a timeout. I am not going to be speaking to you for, I need 30 minutes. Maybe that's all you can do at that time until you get strong enough to be able to say, I will not be speaking to you again or sleeping in the same room until you repair this situation that happened. Because until that is done, our relationship is broken. That's where you want to be able to get to if you are staying in the relationship. But I want you to give yourself permission to take baby steps, because it might be really hard to even set a 20 or 30-minute boundary because you're so used to wanting to get out of the cycle of abuse that is in the abuse part, and you want to get to the honeymoon part. You want to get to the love bombing part where you just acquiesce, where you accommodate so you can get those feelings of connection again. But that's where you need to work on yourself, which we'll talk more in our second workshop from now. And while there's so many ways that you can love yourself well, I don't want to gloss over this. You have likely been in a destructive relationship for a long time, which has naturally caused you to carry a lot of self-doubt and concern about your abilities to not only make good decisions, but to see yourself as loving and as a deserving person that you are. You are valuable. You are deserving of experiencing mutual, safe love where equality is the daily norm, where when you express your concerns, your complaints, or your emotional feelings, your partner treats your expressions with a sincere sense of curiosity, a sense of, gee, I want to know more about what you're saying, not one that shuts you down and stonewalls you and blocks you. You want someone who's eager to understand more about you and what makes you feel unsafe and what makes you feel loved and cared for. That's what healthy looks like on a consistent basis, where you can each say, gee, I want to know more about that. I'm not sure I fully understand why that was so upsetting to you. And now I'm not talking about an abuser, because when we accommodate an abuser, it has a very different dynamic. It's just going to create more abuse. But in a healthy relationship, that's how your spouse would be treating you, with curiosity, looking at complaints and concerns as an opportunity to get to know you better. That's what would happen. So there's so much to say around this topic of cultivating healthy relationships. But I feel like I've gone so far over time, and there's a little bit more that I would like to say, but let me just close by saying that first and foremost, stay good and true to yourself in relation to others. Cultivate a relationship where there is comfort, being open for both people, and where integrity and good value systems are shared as a priority. Values, integrity, truth-telling. Abusers fail in these areas over and over again. It's a moving target. You want there to be integrity and a good value system in your relationships. And that doesn't mean that you'll always share the same views or beliefs about the world at large. But for example, if you're in a destructive relationship and you're contemplating whether to stay or leave, and your confidant attempts to impose upon you absolute beliefs according to their specific worldview, like when you reach out to who you think is a safe person and now they're imposing their worldview, you are likely to feel wrongly judged, criticized, ostracized, and so forth. I want you to avoid those situations. I'm encouraging you to find people to be close to you who will respect your voice, and because that's what you need to build up your voice, and respect your boundaries and love you regardless of what your personal decisions that you make for your own life are, whether you decide to stay or leave. Set boundaries when you need them in place, or maybe even just take space when you need it. That's okay. And remember that setting boundaries is healthy and keeps you safe emotionally as well as physically. And we need to be teaching that to our children. So communicate. Communication is so important to maintaining healthy relationships. But I hate when people say, oh, well, we just have communication problems. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that's such a minimization of what's really happening when abuse is happening. I'm talking about communicate your needs or your boundaries. Don't be afraid to do so. You can say it in a very loving way, but you can be firm. If you are not willing to hold boundaries, then you are enabling the abuse. That's the part of codependency or self-love deficit disorder that comes in. You're so afraid to speak your voice that now you become the enabler. You're over functioning. So in closing, I'd like to let you know about our next free workshop, which I briefly talked about, trauma bonds, which blends with this topic very well. And then we'll quickly follow up with self-love abundance, which is going to be so powerful. I really want you to attend and register for that. The topics are all related and intertwined, so I really think that you'll glean a full picture of the topic as a whole. And I want to invite you to stay connected to us, if you aren't already, by joining our mailing list, where you will receive our blogs, our newsletters, and updates about our training courses. Please head over to our website and sign up today to continue along this journey. Also, we would love for you to join us in our April cohort. It's a 4-week class with a 1-hour live session with me each week. It also has wonderful written material. It's such a special experience when we go through the curriculum together, and over the course of 4 weeks, we come together each week, and we truly enjoy rich discussions and interaction with our team and with each other. You can reach out to our team if you're interested in more information or if you have any questions, but I really hope that I'll see you there. And so now, as the very end, if you have any questions, I'm going to stay on until I've answered all your questions. So if you have to leave, I understand. You can find it in the recording, but if you would like to ask me any questions now, this is the time to do it.
We do have a number of things in the chat, so I'm just going to kind of start from the bottom and go up. But I want to say one thing real quickly. Next workshop, somebody just asked. It's April 11th is our trauma bonds workshop, and then we're working on securing a date for the following on self-love abundance. So stay tuned on that date. You'll want to be at them both. These are all related topics. Um, so I wanted to say real quick, we had so much engagement here. And at the same time, with so many names as CA, there were a lot of people I couldn't direct message back. Just with my heartfelt understanding and being able to respond to you in the chat. So please know I saw everything and I'll share everything that I can here with Annette. If something we talk about or I share with Annette doesn't get addressed and you want to reach out to us, please know our team's available at info@themendproject.com. We don't want anybody to leave here feeling like, wait, I still want to connect with you about something. So, okay. Here we go. Okay, someone who is going through a divorce with their with an attorney husband feels overwhelmed at the thought of trying to communicate over anything with him. So thank you so much, Annette. A lot of comments about please tell Annette later that this is so amazing. Thank you. This is so timely. Yes, there was a number of people who said yes about oversharing. Very, right, very relatable. Okay, and then this is a longer comment, and I'll read it to you. Thank you for this training and all the trainings you produce. Very valuable. The epiphany for me a dozen years ago was knowing how my creator views me. He knows me and all my flaws completely and loves me still. Despite the negative messages hurled at me by someone I love so much, my anchor is in my Savior, Jesus Christ. This has given me the foundation and strength to not cling to my marriage, but have a plan, respect myself, share my feelings and my expectations, watching and praying and allowing natural consequences instead of trying to manipulate outcomes. Thank you for all the reminders. It's all so good. Journaling is so important, but so painful. Thank you for the encouragement to do it. My memory is so messed up after 30 years of gaslighting.
I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad that you found solace. That is what I did is I just really invested a lot of time reading the Bible and seeing how God loved me, because I felt like I was the most unlovable person on the planet. And I had to start somewhere, and I didn't trust anyone because I had been doubly abused by my Bible study group. And so on one hand, I was tempted to just never go back to church. But on the other hand, I knew that God was love, and I needed to read about that to validate me. So I'm so glad to hear everything that you just shared. I'm sorry that it has been such a long journey for you. But I'm glad that you found this course helpful. And I think you'll really find our cohort helpful if you're able to join. So I hope we see you there. And I just wish you the very best.
Thank you, Annette. And so we have another comment about the journaling. My lawyer wants me to hand over my journals as evidence. Do we have to?
Oh my goodness. You don't have to do anything because you call the shots, you've hired your attorney. But I would, for me personally, I would probably reach out to an advocacy group, a legal advocacy group, and ask other opinions about what you should do, or call your domestic violence agency and ask to speak to one of their attorneys to ask another opinion. I wouldn't just automatically do what my attorney is suggesting. But there is value in handing over your journals to a safe attorney who really does understand covert emotional abuse. And you may need to educate your attorney a little bit, but I think it's important that you reach out to get a second opinion, because every state has different laws. So I can't possibly speak to what is right for your situation. But I know there is a lot of value in journals, and I would fully want to know what your lawyer intends to do with them. And I would, after I fully understand that, then I would get a second opinion.
Really good. Another comment here. My husband had our home put in my maiden name so people wouldn't find where he and we lived. so we could be, quote, safe. Now I realize he did this so I end up with the unpaid property taxes on my credit, and he wasn't a target for his unpaid federal income taxes. None filed while we've been married, and unfixed for several years of his first marriage. Yeah, like what you were saying, Annette.
In some states, there is something called fraud in the inducement, where he induced you into fraud initially in the first place. So I would look into all of your legal options, because you might find some reprieve, or even going to a tax attorney that can help you reach a huge discount on your owed taxes, and a payment plan, because those are also options that are available. But I would definitely seek legal advice on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry that happened to you. They're so manipulative.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when a new relationship is or isn't abusive? When we've been through a lot of counseling and healing, yet still don't fully trust your gut. I feel no fear with this person as I felt with my ex. There seems to be mutuality, yet I still don't fully trust myself and my instincts.
Then this is not the answer you're going to want to hear. It's probably too soon for you to be in another relationship. I would get Ross Rosenberg's book. I'm just so high on that right now, because of when you say you don't trust your instincts, you need to be able to get to that place of self-love abundance. And in it, he says, if you work really hard, you can get there in a year or two. And I just really encourage you to get to that place, so that you'll be making really good decisions. You won't be questioning yourself, and you'll recognize the red flags much sooner than without doing that necessary work.
Okay, we have a lot of questions still coming in, but I'm gonna go from the bottom up still. So I'm gonna stay on track so I don't miss anybody here. My adult children were turned against me when they were young. When I asked them questions about their lives, I think this isn't so hard to know because they're all CA, but this is, I think, in response to when you made the suggestion for this person to go back to her daughter. When I asked them questions about their lives, they criticize that I can't share freely because I'm criticized and judged and all of that. It's very difficult.
Well, you can start by not asking them questions. You can start by giving them affirmations. You can just say, I miss you so much. I remember this beautiful thing about their personality. You can say several positive things, and you can just be sending them notes of affirmations until you have shown that you're not judged or criticized, or that they're not judged or criticized. And, obviously a lot of the judgment and criticism probably came from their father saying things that you said about them that you never said. So it's hard work. It's not immediately rewarding, but that's just what's coming to my mind right now. Maybe somebody else would have a different answer, but an affirmation is really powerful and can mean a lot.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here about how can I ever heal my relationship with my son? It just states that. So
I don't know if it's a result of an abusive situation. Again, I don't know if there's no communication or some communication, but if you were able to say, can I meet you every Saturday morning for breakfast, even if it's at 6 a.m. and that's the only time they have to offer you, and spend that entire time asking about their life and just affirming them and speaking into them in a loving and positive way. if you're able to do that. And like I said before, if you're not able to see them in person, you can be sending affirmations in a card. And I don't mean something superficial. It needs to be meaningful, where you really do some reflecting on their positive attributes and talk about how you miss them so much, and that you would just love, a hug. You would love to hear about their life and be a part of celebrating their lives, like using words that are not threatening, critical. You don't want to give unwanted advice. You don't want to give them instructions. You're just there to meet them where they are and offer them affirmations and support without anything else at first, until you have a long-standing new relationship. Sometimes these relationships don't mend, and it's heartbreaking. But the ones that I've heard that have mended have done so by not talking negatively about the other spouse.
Annette, these questions are so good. And we have, I think, just a few more. So I'm going to keep pressing along here. I'm in the divorce process. This is a little longer. So, yeah. And if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. I'm in the divorce process without an attorney. I can't afford it. How can I find out if my husband owns a home or if we have joint property? He's hiding all the financial documents and information. He is filing taxes as married filed jointly without my knowledge. I never sign or know about taxes, and he used to tell me it's only for US citizens, and I believed him. We are legal immigrants. I knew about it last year, and since then we are separated, and I'm struggling to find resources. And
I would go to my domestic violence agency, and you might have to call several to get a good lead on a legal advocacy group. I would also write the IRS and say, can you please send me a copy of my income taxes, because my spouse has not ever given me a copy, and I have a strong suspicion that he's fraudulently signing my name. Something like that. I would be stealthy about it and see what you can do. I'm not an attorney, so I'm sorry, I can't give you more advice. That's why I always, I do know that there are pro bono attorneys that do help domestic violence agencies, and it's called something justice. Look up something justice organizations where they help with pro bono legal advocacy work that can help you. And a lot of the work you'll have to do yourself, but if you could just have a meeting with an advocate. There's also an organization called Wings for Justice, and they don't have attorneys, but they have highly skilled advocates, legal advocates that can help answer your questions, and can and they work in a lot of different states, and they can help you get information that you normally wouldn't be able to get your hands on. And they can help you even prepare to go to court to represent yourself, because of their experience and representing so many women who don't have the funds to hire an attorney. Wings for Justice.
yes, and I'm not familiar with this. You might be, Annette, but there's another person who dropped in the chat that it's called To Peace Ministries. That's the full thing, is called To Peace, and they have free advocates to help walk through this as well. So if she's unable to locate someone, they can't provide legal advice, but they have experience and resources and will walk alongside free of charge, just similar to Wings for Justice.
That's great.
A couple of resources there. And that's the beauty of having a large group and
Yes.
who know, and we can all help with different things. Let me just real quick scroll the chat because I think we actually addressed most of it. The book that you mentioned by Ross Rosenberg is The Human Magnet Syndrome.
Yes, it's, let's see, let me scroll way up to the top of my notes because that's the second half of it. It's called, hold on. Where is it? Where is it? It's called The Human Magnet Syndrome, the Codependent Narcissist Trap.
And, oh, the added resource. I'm going to repeat that real quickly for anybody who's asking. So the first one was Wings for Justice that Annette mentioned, and that second one is called CALLED, 2-piece, 3 words, called 2-piece Ministries. So make sure everybody gets that. And then, oh, this is sweet. And this is a great way to end this out. Wish I could hug you guys. Being with you here is like sitting at the feet of Jesus and experiencing his compassion, understanding, and protection and value in the flesh. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. What a nice compliment. We just care so much about all of you and all of what you're going through, and are so proud that you're investing time in yourself by participating in a workshop like this. And just keep looking for more. We hope to be posting them more often in the future. So we hope to see you next time, the next 2 times, especially because they're right on this topic. So for today, thank you so much for all your engagement and your questions. As you can see, it just really enriches the conversation, and I so appreciate that. So bye for now. Thank you. Take good care.